Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kick Sugar Summit. Today I have with me Dr. Rhona Epstein, and I'll just read her bio. She's a licensed psychologist, addictions counselor, marriage and family therapist in the Philadelphia area. She's the author of 3 books, one called Food Triggers, End Your Cravings, Eat Well and Live Better, 2, Satisfied, a 90-day journey towards food freedom. And her final book is called Satisfied, the Workbook. For over 30 years, she's been like a really early pioneer in the sugar food addiction recovery space. But she started out getting masters, working in the drug and alcohol recovery field. But at the same time, she was doing her own recovery from sugar addiction. She describes herself as a hardcore sugar addict. She's one of us. And so while she was getting recovery from that, she kept thinking, wouldn't it be absolutely amazing one day when all of these resources that are being created for people trying to recover from drug and alcohol addiction are actually available to people who are struggling with food, processed food addiction. So then she shifted over into that area of expertise. And for 30 years, she's been working in that space, helping people to overcome addiction, food addiction, as well as to address and heal the underlying issues. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology and her master's degree in counseling psychology from Temple University. She is passionate about this topic professionally and personally, as we noted, and she is just coming up to, or just in the realm of 39 years of back-to-back abstinence, no refined carbohydrates in her bloodstream for 39 years, which in and of itself is really astonishing. So welcome to the summit.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything more you want to say about your own journey of recovering, of walking this, recovery from your own food addiction, sugar addiction?
Oh, well, do we have all day? I love talking about my recovery because it's a blessing and a gift. And I know it inspires and encourages people, but I know we don't have all day, but all I'll say is that I'm really thankful. I know that this is an awful, horrible thing to live through. I mean, my experience as someone who had a problem with food from the time I was really little until I was in my teens when I actually started to get help. And my life was a nightmare when I was in the food. I was, I would say, a low bottom sugar addict at a very young age. And, I don't know how anybody was at 17 would end up in a recovery group unless it was pretty bad. And it was pretty bad. And so I know how anyone here who's listening, who's having trouble, I know what it's like to be in the throes of being out of control and feeling like I wanted to die every day, actually, because I just didn't know how to stop. And I couldn't stand, like, you just wake up every day making promises saying today is going to be different. Today I'm going to stop. And then, another day of a half gallon of ice cream, another day of a whole box of cookies and a jar of peanut butter, all in one sitting. And then, feeling like dying. And that was a terrible, terrible life. So I feel very grateful to be a person who is free. I can say this, that old life, I don't want anything of it. And so it's remembering what it was like, the ugliness, the darkness, the hate I had for myself and my life like that. And the double life that I lived of trying to act like a normal person on the outside when I was tortured with obsession and compulsion. I don't want anything to do with that. And I know that staying away from sugar is a really important part of being able to live a life of freedom, have a life at all, to have be able to be successful in any arena of my life, that having that taken care of, having that straight is like a key to being able to live a full and sane life, or somewhat sane, I guess. I hope. I hope it's in.
Right. Thanks for that honesty. Right. And the other side of sugar is better, but not perfect. Right. We're still evolving as souls. Yes.
Yeah.
So what is absolutely astonishing to me about that story is that at 17, you'd hit bottom. And by 19, you had got into a program, a 12-step program to help you with your disordered eating. But honest to goodness, I mean, maybe there was less bombardment of junk food back then, Dr. Rhona. But I know my daughter's 20. She's, struggles with this issue. Every time she turns around, there's junk food in her face. And it's just really hard. Like, how did you begin to even remotely at such a tender age have the willpower, discipline, clarity to say no to pizza when everyone else is drinking, popping pizza and drinking? Like, how did you do that?
Well, I had a lot of help. So, I mean, and I didn't have willpower. I didn't. I had a lot of help. I actually, somewhere somebody said the right words in a recovery group, something like this. I heard these words: "It's life or death," and I actually felt like I was fighting for my life. And I somehow or another, those words just got to me. Like, you either are going to choose to get away from this junk food and start this path of recovery, or you are going to die. And it was either, I mean, I don't see like cookies and candy and ice cream as like something, it had lost its fun factor. It was all just destruction at that point for me. And it was clear as day to me that I was being destroyed by it. So I was fighting for my life. I was going after it took me 2.5 years from 17 to 19 to get clear of it all. Because I don't think I understood the addiction. Like today I have such clarity. I really understand the addiction. I understand the power of the first bite. But it took me the school of hard knocks, trying to see what I can get away with, see if I can have a little of this or a little of that, until I realized surrendering and realizing I can't have any of those foods that are my addictive foods. I have to have complete freedom from them. But I had to learn the hard way. I didn't just listen to the people. I had to do the school of hard knocks. But I stayed on that path because I knew I needed. I knew it wasn't fun being in an insane relationship with food. I wanted out. So if I like I said, I was fighting for my life. So I didn't need to be a part of what everybody else was doing because it wasn't fun anymore.
Oh my gosh, incredible. I could see all the same for me, but I don't know what you got that I didn't, because I was suicidally depressed. I had acne, had blinding migraines. I was binge eating a dozen donuts for breakfast, and then not eating. And when I ate, it was a pop with no Henry bar. Like, it was terrible. And I was, but you know what? I didn't have any access to resources and programs. Like, I didn't know there's 12-step programs. I didn't know there was even anybody else out there doing these bizarre behaviors with food, right? Digging stuff out of garbage, being obsessed, being so depressed. It was awful. It was truly a nightmare. So amazing. Tell us a bit more about what you know now. What do you understand now about addiction that you didn't even know then?
Well, I didn't know anything. I mean, like you, I guess when I started, there wasn't any education. There wasn't any treatment. There wasn't anything, just 12-step programs in the basements of churches and things like that, But today there's so much that we know that has helped to solidify. The science is there that, sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And you can actually see brain imaging and look at how the brain lights up when somebody eats sugar who's addicted. And it's like, we have different brains than the people who, to understand that, to know, I know that I'm different than other people when it comes to sugar. So I don't have to I don't, so, good for you. You get to eat it. Like, God bless the person who can have that little piece and just enjoy it. Those people. I'm not one of them. My brain is broken in that area. There's something that I don't have in my brain because, when I get a little, I can feel it in my body, and so normal people, they have a little and they're done. But, for me, it's just more. And, and that's just a very powerful thing to understand that, it's a real thing, just like cocaine. I don't, when I try to explain it to people, I'm like, this is no different than a cocaine addiction or a heroin addiction. For me, that ice cream is heroin. And that's my heroin. And I look at that and I'm like, that is my death. And it looks sweet and yummy, but it is heroin. And I'm glad I can understand that today, like very, very clearly. And I'm glad there's so much science that backs it up.
And even with catastrophic health consequences, I mean, you and I both have people come to us, they've got diabetes, they've had cancer, sometimes twice, they're obese, morbidly obese, they're incredibly depressed. They're like, I know this is, like, I literally know this is killing me. I'm on 7 different medications now, and I can't get it through my head that I can't eat a little. How do you help somebody like that?
I have those kinds of people all the time. It's really hard. I mean, really the best thing that I can do for anybody in that situation is to suggest that they go to meetings and get around people who are in recovery and hear the stories of other people who were like them, who actually, because I think there's obviously it's partly denial, partly just not being able to imagine. Like, I know many, many people look at me, I'm sure you have this too, people who cannot imagine living without sugar.
Yeah.
Like, this is true in the eating disorders industry. Like, if I've talked to people, counselors who work in the big eating disorders treatment centers, and they are appalled by the idea that you would tell somebody not to eat sugar. Like, they just think that's like the worst thing that you could possibly do, because of course it's restricting. And I'm like, you don't understand, it saved my life. But we're in a culture that doesn't understand this problem. So I understand when these people who are on these, they don't really get it. They don't get it. We don't get it. We understand heroin. We understand alcohol. We understand cocaine. We don't understand that sugar is that as a culture. So you trying to help a person to understand that, it takes like a lot sometimes, maybe reading, the Alcoholics Anonymous book and trying to put that, help you read it through the mind that, your food is like that, trying to help them to see it like an addiction. And some people just need to go to treatment because they aren't going to get it any other way, because the addiction's so powerful that they just need to go away for a while until it's all out of their system and they've learned everything they need to learn. But even then, I've had people who've been in and out of treatment many times. They've learned it all. And that power of that addiction is so strong. And, I just feel very grateful that I understand this for myself, and I do my best to impart it to people and try to help them to do the best they can to get to the place where they can let it go. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we're eating. It's not just that we like the food. And so we have to get to some of those other parts too. Like, maybe we're eating for a million emotional reasons. And so it's not just so simple, like, oh, stop eating sugar and you'll be all better. Maybe they're eating it because it's keeping them from feeling really horrible feelings that they can't face. So that's something that, we have to realize when somebody's in that condition and they're not able to part with it.
Right. And I think that's why counselors in the eating disorder space are like, oh, no, it's not about the sugar. It's about their feelings. It's about the trauma. And if you can heal that, then everyone can be neutral. Everyone can intuitively, everybody can dabble with a little bit of sugar and it doesn't grip us and take us into a binge. Because they honestly believe that if we can get to these underlying issues, we can heal those, and then we can heal our relationship with food. So what would you say to that argument?
Well, I mean, if it worked, then I would, I've had people who have come to me after 10 rounds of these sort of treatments that believe that philosophy. and bulimic, for example, and or compulsive eater, and they come to me, or what they would call them emotional eaters. They put them in emotional eating or binge eating, and they come to me after multiple rounds of trying to heal their emotions, and they're still binging, but never once would anybody suggest to them the addictions model. It's just not mentioned. They don't know about it, which is so sad. It breaks my heart. It's like, I'm not saying all the people who have eating disorders have an addiction, but if you've tried all over and over again the same thing, why don't you try a different model? Like, how do you know that they don't have a physiological addiction? How do you know that if you pull the sugar that they might be free? And the thing that I find to be so challenging about all this is, like, no one has a problem with abstinence for alcohol or drugs. We all agree that that's a fine recommendation for somebody who has a substance abuse problem. But if you dare take away the sugar, everybody goes ballistic. It's like we're doing something terrible. So I try to help them to look at why is this different than alcohol or drugs? Why do you see, how is this any different? And of course, I think that there's a valid thing, because there is like orthorexia, and there are people who are anorexic who are afraid of foods like sugar and fat and other things. And that's a different disorder, though. But they're clumping all the food addicts in the anorexia pile and treating them like it's the same problem. Food addiction is not the same as anorexia. So anyway, I would love to be able to impact the eating disorders world with this message, because I feel like they should just know nobody's saying that you're wrong, but what if it's not working? Why don't you try this other way? That would be what I give to them. Please just try it. How do you know?
Right. And right. This whole idea that this whole struggle that we have, that both parties can both be right.
Hello. Both parties can both be right. Like, why is it that in the world there's different treatments, like you for all different kinds of illnesses? You try this medicine. If it doesn't work, you try that medicine. If that doesn't work, you try this treatment. Why with this there's only this model and you can't do this model? Mm-hmm. It's very short-sighted.
One of the criticisms I had with my own personal experience when I went into recovery for my addiction, eventually, well into my 30s, before I even knew there was such a thing, a 12-step program for food addiction. And when I got there was a one-size-fits-all meal plan. Let me tell you, Dr. Rhona, there was a one-size-fits-all, and it didn't fit me. And it was always my fault. It was because my food addict was trying to be difficult. And I was like, I knew it wasn't. And so I eventually left, discouraged, 22 pounds underweight. I was nursing a baby. I was told that, if we can't keep the weight on you, then you're just going to have to stop nursing your baby. And I wept. And I just thought, why does there have to be a one size fits all? I love that you talk about that. So tell us about your own experience with this idea that sometimes people hear this message of, you have an eating disorder, you can't restrict sugar because that'll make it worse, as opposed, you have food addiction, well, then you got to eat this, right? So talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, this is a very controversial issue amongst the food addict world. I mean, in the 12-step programs themselves and amongst the food addiction professionals, there is no agreement here about this. You've got the camps where they believe that you do it this way, where you have to measure your food and you have to measure the food because volume is an addictive behavior, and basically all foods that are potentially addictive in all behaviors. So then you have the one size fits all. So then everybody has to fit into that. And then you have, but I think there are people who need that plan and who do well on that plan. And I celebrate them. Sorry for my dog barking. Okay. There are people who need that and do well on that. And so I celebrate that if that's what works for them. And I have known people over the years who really, they go off the rails if they're not weighing, measuring, and on, a plan that really is careful in extreme measures. I can see that they can still have a healthy, well-rounded life and be peaceful and sane with food, but they really do need to measure because their eyeballs are broken, and when some of us, our eyeballs are broken. We don't know how to put a normal portion of food on our plate. But, like for myself, I am a sugar addict. I binged on sugar. I didn't binge on salmon and vegetables. So, and I first started my recovery, I was just like you. I was handed this food plan, and I'm putting the food on a scale and putting my food in cups, and I'm doing this because they told me to, and I'm kind of resentful at it. But I'm doing it anyway, and I'm realizing after a while, why am I doing this? I could do this I don't need to do this. I eat normal portions of healthy food. I'm not abusing volume of course, I was further along when I had the realization that, of course, now I'm saying something like, I don't follow the exact rules of some, and I was scared because, what if I was going to be judged by the people who think that the only way to do it is to measure exactly in this exact way? And then also some people, like over the years, I know some people can eat whole grain breads like Ezekiel bread, or some people don't have problems with some, I have a friend in food recovery who eats foods I wouldn't go near. Not sugar, but I have gone to dinner with her and she said, do you want to have one of these with me? I looked at her like, are you kidding? There's no way I can't have that because it's like something that I can't eat. It's like something that would be like a sugar-free dessert. I can't eat sugar-free dessert. That's too much like the real thing. But she can eat that. But now I know most of my clients can't eat those foods. I haven't actually met a client who's been able to eat those foods without losing control with them. They end up sick. They end up abusing it. It just never works. But she does, and she's been abstinent for like 30 years and isn't fighting with food. So respect, right? I don't judge her. She's got sanity in her life with food, and somehow or another she's managing that. I'm not recommending that, by the way, because like I said, most people I don't think can handle all those things. It's like near beer to an alcoholic. If it looks like it, it tastes like it, right? So anyway, I'm probably talking too long, but I think that there's suggestions that are made, and that sometimes those suggestions can be good for a starting place. And I think as a person grows spiritually and emotionally in their recovery, and they find that they're really not fighting with food, that it's okay to work with their support system to figure out, do I really need to follow this exact plan? Or, maybe I don't need, like, as I've grown older, I need less food than I needed when I was young, right? So, if I was still eating the same amount that they told me, I'd be gaining weight in menopause. I had to take away my snacks now. I'm old. My metabolism slowing down, right? So, it's a different season. Like you said, when you were nursing mom, it's a different season. Sometimes you need to be, and so being able to trust that you have this, like you're not abusing food. There's a difference between drugging yourself with food and eating healthy. And we have to figure it out. And that's the thing that's so complicated. I think why we can't agree is because we want to put ourselves in a box and we want it to be one way. But I think we're too complicated to be a one-way thing, because the one person, if you put them in a box, they're going to react to the box. It's like being put in a straitjacket, and all they want to do is get out of it. Because, don't put me that rigid. I can't live like that. I need to breathe. Where the other person, if they don't have a straitjacket, they'll blow it. So, but you see, it's a different kind of person. So you've got to know who you are, and you've got to be able to work with who you are with your support system and figure it out. It's so complicated. If it was drugs and alcohol, it'd be easy. It's black and white. No mood am I altering drugs. Well, for me, no food abuse, no sugar abuse. No, I have rules. I mean, there are rules. Everyone has to have their rule. Like, I know I don't just randomly eat. I don't just go into a cabinet and just start pulling things out because I feel like it. I have my meals in a set way. And I recommend that my clients do the same, because I don't think intuitive eating works for food addiction. But being able to figure out, what is my structure, and where are my lines, and what can I do when I go to a restaurant, and what do I need? Everyone's a little different. Some people need to bring the scale to the restaurant. Other people don't need to do that. So anyway, I know I spoke enough. But.
Oh, no, it's great. And I'm sure there's all kinds of people celebrating that as well. And one thing that you said that struck me is that sometimes in the early days, because I did that, I have to say that they gave me a foundation, back-to-back, clean, structured abstinence. And from there, I learned to dial in what works for me and what doesn't, and to trust myself. I always say, we can trust ourselves with whole foods, generally speaking, unless they're clear trigger foods. But we cannot trust ourselves with anything processed, because those are drugs for us. So we kind of can do intuitive eating, just it always has to be a whole food and in the context of a balanced meal, and not like snacking and grazing all day and all those other things. But
exactly.
Yeah. And there's people that come into my programs who are like, I don't need to weigh and measure. Okay, great. And if you're slipping and sliding and you're struggling and you don't have peace with food, try it as a tool. Try it for 90 days. And then if you can get so solid and peaceful there, then experiment again and see if you can go and do it without a scale. And if you can do it, great. And if you keep relapsing, come back to the damn scale, or come back to the formula where we take out the known trigger foods, like grains even, or corn, or sweet fruits, or just keep trying it till you'll know. When you've got it, don't you?
You are so right. That's exactly how I'm right with you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about what's underneath addiction. So certainly there's this strong physiological piece. We respond to refined carbohydrates like an opiate. But underneath addictions, there's always an ocean of stuff going on. So how do you help your clients get in there and do some of the deeper recovery work? What does it look like?
Well, that could look a lot of ways, but, I think, there's a combination of obviously learning to separate food and feelings, which is a very complicated thing, because, that's one of the biggest challenges. I think one of the biggest relapse issues, besides food being a relapse issue, I think emotions are the very next biggest thing. Stress, anxiety, anger, fear, all those things tend to trigger people to eat. And people have to learn what are their triggers, and what are their feelings. And actually, when you spent your whole life using food to not feel, you don't really know what you feel. And so it's got to be a lesson that we have to be about every day, sort of learning. I use feelings lists with people. I recommend to them, like, especially the ones who have been numb their whole lives. I'm dealing with a 58-year-old person who has no access to their emotions. They've been numb for 58 years. They have no clue when they're sad. And I think this is a very common problem. I'm sorry, my dog is going in and out. I think it's a very common thing to minimize or dismiss emotions, and I think not realizing how much food has allowed us to be able to not have to worry about those pesky little emotions of ours. Like, so if I just, dismiss it, then, or we put down ourselves and say, oh, that's stupid, I shouldn't feel that way. So if a person hurts our feelings, or, we've a family member really, sticks a knife in, or, there's some real disappointment. And then, you say, oh, it's stupid, I shouldn't feel that way. This is like the way I think people talk to themselves, because they're used to just brushing off, dismissing, and minimizing it, but not realizing all the while that the way you dismiss your feelings is by eating. Because that's how you're able to function without feeling those painful feelings. So if you're not going to use the food, then the feelings, you can't keep dismissing them, because they need your attention, right? So if you feel sad or lonely or hurt, we now need to address those feelings. And that's where it becomes very complicated, because the truth is what we have are grown people who are emotionally not, I hate to say this, I don't mean to be hurtful to people, but they say in addiction treatment, you're emotionally the age that you were when you started using your addiction. So, but for food addicts, we start young. So I could be looking at a 40-year-old woman who has been numbing herself with food since she was a little girl, and she's got the emotions of a little girl, emotionally immature. And so now when we feel like having tantrums and we have all these very uncomfortable, horrible, uncomfortable feelings. And then we have to learn what to do with all that. You used the word a sea of emotions. I love the word sea because I use that analogy all the time of the waves. Like I have this client who's dealing with terrible rejection from a family member. And that's not uncommon these days. Young people rejecting their parents and just, people just so hurt by these sort of cancel culture, I just harsh, really painful stuff. But to have this painful feeling come, not dismiss it, be able to say, I'm riding a sadness wave, and have that feeling and not be afraid of it. Like if you were going to surf on the ocean, until you learn to ride the waves, they come and they go. And that's how sadness is and how a lot of other feelings can be. I mean, some feelings we need to work through. Like if you are angry at somebody, maybe you need to get somebody to help you change your perspective so that you can forgive the person. There's so many, this is a talk we can have all day. I can talk on this subject all day because this is really what I do. I spend all day with people, helping them with all the things that are underneath of, we have to put the food in its right place, but then if you're going to stay clean, you've got to know what to do with the stuff that goes on, all the stuff that stresses you out, the fear things, all of these things, and the pain from the past, the hurts from being abused or growing up in an alcoholic family. We have to be able to figure out how to forgive the people and heal the wounds. And there's so much. Therapy can go on for a long time, to be honest. It's not that simple. This is a very complicated matter.
So well put. Yes. And I guess I was imagining if I was an addict who's really darn focused and trying to unhook from sugar because it's, hurting me physically, mentally, and I'm listening to this, I'd be like, oh God, I think I'll just go eat sugar. It sounds scary and too much and too long. And I'm going to always be in pain. But what would you say that would encourage people to just keep walking the path of recovery?
Yeah, well, you know what? You're right. Actually, I had a publisher when I went to write my second book, but somebody read my book, some publishing guy read my book and he said, your book is really great, but most people don't want what you're writing because I wrote all about this, and in Food Triggers, my first book. And he said, it's too hard. People want easy. They don't want to have to work on themselves, right? But yes, you're right. It's so important. People need to know it. Look, here's the thing. If there's stuff inside that needs to be healed, and and I know this is the scary part. It's like, I don't want to have to do that. Can't we just go on a diet and make it go away? I want the weight to go away. I don't want to have to deal with these things. And, people feel like that in the 12-step programs. They don't want to do the hard parts between steps 4 and 9, where you have to do the inventory and the amends and all that hard stuff. I think this is where we need support. We need faith. We need to understand that what we do by learning this, if we are patient with ourselves and we take it a day at a time and one issue at a time, that we become emotionally healthy, that we can learn and we can grow, and that we can become more peaceful, more happy people. And that being emotionally mature is not like a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's something to feel good about. And to just trust the process. If you don't give up, that it gets better. And what we're doing really by doing this, like when you learn to turn things over and to to not get all jammed up every time something upsetting happens, and you have new skills for finding a way to practice peace in the midst of chaos, or you develop a new sense about how to react to things. You're a lot less likely to use food because you don't need to, because you took care of the problem that you were using food to take care of before. All the reasons we were sedating ourselves or drugging ourselves, we're taking that away when we learn the skills for, facing our fears or healing our relationships. So yeah, it's hard. It is, but life is hard, right? But we need people. That's why we need support. And I think we need spirituality. We need tools. We need lots of tools, and just give ourselves time to learn the tools. It's okay that it's hard. What's wrong with it that it's hard? Right? But I don't know anybody who was sorry or regretted doing the hard work. I have to be very honest with you. Every person who I know who actually did the hard work of recovery would say 100% they were glad they went through the process, because it is beyond their wildest dreams. And I know that no one would turn around and say, I wish I hadn't done that.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautifully put. So incredible. And I love that you're painting a realistic picture here, right? We get abstinent. We put food, as you said, in its place to free ourselves up, to fall in love, instead of all the self-hatred and the shame and pain that comes with addiction. We're moving into the sunlight of recovery. We're moving into a process of learning new skills that we'll get better at, and life will just get better and better. And really, at the end of the day, when we're in an addiction, our lives will always get worse. It'll spiral down. Mm-hmm. And when we move into recovery, our lives spiral up, and we ask ourselves, how good can it get? How good can this get, right? And so at least we're heading in the right direction when we're walking the path of recovery. So I think you summarized that so beautifully, because it is work, and it's not all sunshines and roses on the other side of breaking up with sugar, but it is, it opens doors to blessings and benefits that you just cannot walk through. You can't get to those doors as long as you're spinning around with your addictions and our disordered eating. Is there any final words that you would like to share with our audience before we wrap up today?
Well, I thank you for letting me join you. I could talk all day because I have a million things to say that are, wonderful about recovery, but I would say this: it is worth it. If there's anyone who's out there who is struggling, it is worth it to find recovery and to not quit. I know it's hard. It's hard to find the way out. It's hard to believe and have hope after falling over and over again, even after years. I'm sure that some people feel like they're never going to get it. And I know that a lot of people feel like that. Like, why should I even bother trying after years of failing? But there's a way out. And people do get free. There are people everywhere that are free and are living like a much better and a much different life. And I'm not saying it's all like you said, it's not all, life is still hard, but it's way better. And so peace is possible with food, and your mind does not have to be crazy with cravings and obsession. And, sometimes people say, I will always want it. I will always have cravings. And that is not true. If a person sticks to a recovery road, they can be free from cravings and obsessions, and they can actually have a quiet mind. And that is something to do it for, not just a healthy body, but a healthy mind. So
I love it. Absolutely amazing. What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you very much again, Dr. Epstein, for your work and your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.